Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. In this particular video, let's have a look at what is the syllabus that you need to prepare and the strategy that you need to follow to answer the questions that are asked in UPSC Civil Services examination from the subject of Indian economy. This particular subject is very important not only for the prelims but also in the mains. Specifically for prelims, the UPSC doesn't prescribe all the syllabus, but there are certain very important chapters, or let's say the modules, that you need to prepare for. What is the list of the modules or the chapters? We'll have a look at. And how many questions have been asked from this particular segment within the UPSC Civil Service examination, both in the prelims as well as mains. We'll have a look at all of it. Now, as a subject of Indian economy, before I start the discussion, here are certain very important pointers. Most of you, I believe, are from a different background. That is, in terms of education, some of you will be from science background, some of you will be from arts, some will be from commerce, some from XYZ. Now, irrespective of the background, remember this particular point, UPSC will not test the technical knowledge of economics. Sir, what do you mean by the technical knowledge here? UPSC will not ask you to draw graphs which are very complicated. They will not ask you to explain the integration or the calculation involving many aspects in the economics, etc. So, as a subject of Indian economy, what you need to simply understand is this. This subject of economics is very complicated and very technical in nature. People take 6 years, 8 years of studies to understand economics. But for UPSC Civil Services examination, should you spend 6 years to study economics? Absolutely no. There is no requirement of that particular sort. There is a saying in English, jack of all trades but master of none. But for UPSC exams, remember this. You should be jack of all trades. Even if you are not a master of any subject, doesn't matter. You should be a jack of all trades. You should know subjects such as polity, economics, environment and ecology, geography, history, etc. You don't have to be an expert in all the subjects, and you will take a lot of time to become an expert also. So what you need to understand is simply this, especially Indian economy. You need to understand the basic concepts, plus you need to understand how to apply these particular basic concepts in the current affairs. For example, something is being discussed in the context of, let's say, goods and services tax. You don't have to understand A to Z of the goods and services tax. If you can understand the basics of GST and if you can explain what is happening in the current affairs regarding GST, more than sufficient for UPSC exams. Now, before looking at the syllabus, what is the trend of the questions being asked? How many questions are asked every year? Now, this particular graphical representation will show you what has been the trend of number of questions asked from the Indian economy subject in the last many years in the UPSC Prelims examination, that is civil service examination at the preliminary stage. On an average, you will see that the number of questions asked are in the range of, let's say, 15 or let's say around 16. Don't worry about the calculation of average here. All you need to understand is this. This Indian economy is very important for the civil service preliminary examination. That is the inference you need to draw. UPSC will not ask you how many questions have been asked from Indian economy in 2015, 2016 or 2018 or for that matter 2021. Please don't mug up that. But the trend is very simple. On an average, around 15 to 16 questions will come from this particular area of Indian economy in the civil services examination preliminary stages. And the number of questions, remember this also, it is not purely current affairs question, or it is not purely a static question also. Many of the times these particular questions, or umpteen times, these questions will have, let's say, 1 or 2 statements, or let's say 3 statements, where these particular 3 statements are a group of, or let's say they have picked up from static portion of Indian economy as well as the dynamic aspect, or let's say the current affairs from the Indian economy. So do not try to divide this particular subject purely as a static or dynamic. Do not try to have that particular kind of an approach. Why? The questions can have, let's say, 3 statements, out of which two are static in nature, one is a dynamic in nature. So in that particular situation, what are you supposed to do? You cannot simply say, sir, I know only static, so I will address only the questions on the static part of the economy. Or you cannot simply say, sir, I know only current affairs, so I will attempt only current affairs question. That would be a very wrong approach for this particular subject as such. Done? So this is the trend. Next, now the question arises, sir, what are the very important areas in the Indian economy that I am supposed to read? Which chapter? Which are the very important, let's say, the models from where the questions are generally asked, etc. This is the list of the topics. This is the list of the topics. First, you will have to learn certain aspects of microeconomics. Understand this? Now, generally some of the subjects, the divisions are there. Same can be applied even in case of Indian economy. That is, economics as a subject is divided into two parts. One is macroeconomics, second one is microeconomics. What is the basic difference? Microeconomics studies everything in detail. For example, if I just apply the concept to your college education. In the college, you must have studied certain aspects of, let's say, cells, certain aspects of the organisms, etc. Now, some of you will say, sir, no, I am not a science student, I studied something else. Doesn't matter. Whenever you study anything in detail, right, as an individual concept like this, it is called as microeconomics. And whenever you study everything in an aggregate form, total form, it is called as a macroeconomics. For Indian economy, please understand this. UPSC doesn't ask too many questions on microeconomics, at least a pure theory part, very less is asked. But the application part, sometimes one or two questions in the prelims will come from the concept of microeconomics. For example, the law of supply and demand. What are the different types of products which are available in the market? What is a substitute good? What is an opportunity cost, etc., etc. So start with basic idea of economics. What is the basic concepts within the microeconomics? Very little information. The application part, that is where you need to start. After that, you need to discuss about GDP, gross domestic product. You need to study about it. Now you will say, sir, you are saying gross domestic product, but you have written something else here, national income aggregates. The most important of the aggregate, that is the sum total, is the concept of gross domestic product. But apart from GDP, there are also other aspects of the aggregates such as gross national product, net domestic product, net national product, national income, per capita income, etc. So these are the other very important aggregates from this particular chapter that you are supposed to understand. Now within this also, there are a lot of calculations which are provided in many of the books. Please do not run behind calculations. UPSC doesn't ask you to calculate all of them. There are certain important formulas. For example, for GDP, there is a formula. There are 3 different methods to calculate GDP. There are 3 different formulas for that. In that situation, I will simply ask you to mug up those particular formulas, understand them and remember those particular formulas. But calculation wise, different books would have given different calculations, numericals. You do not have to mug up calculations for this particular chapter as such. After that, there is inflation. For example, in recent times, if you have been seeing the news or let's say reading the newspaper, Reserve Bank of India has been talking so much about the impact of inflation on the Indian economy. The Russia-Ukraine war has an impact on inflation in India. So you need to understand what is inflation, how it is measured, what can cause inflation, what is the role of government as well as Reserve Bank of India in controlling inflation. If there is an issue of let's say deflation, how do we counter it? Stagflation, how do we counter it? What is the base effect? What is monetary policy framework agreement, etc. So these are certain very important areas that you need to study under the concept of inflation. Then there is taxation. What do you mean by a tax? What are the different types of taxation systems? Very often you will come across a concept of a direct tax, indirect tax, progressive, regressive, etc. You need to understand all those aspects of taxation. Let me ask you a very simple question. Why do you think Government of India imposes a tax? What do you think? If you purchase a product, if you go to watch a movie, you have purchased a mobile phone, you have purchased Maggie, whatever you have done, you have paid a tax to the government. Why do you think Government of India, or let's say the state governments, impose and collect the tax from you, me and everybody in India? Just think of it. So what is the need for a taxation? How are different taxes imposed by the government, collected by the government? What type of taxes come under the central government power as well as the state government powers? VAT, petrol and diesel, GST, capital gains tax, base erosion and profit shifting, etc. These are the various aspects of taxation that you are expected to study. Then there is a very important chapter for prelims, banking. What do you mean by a bank? What is the role of Reserve Bank of India? How the governor of RBI is appointed? What are the different sections under RBI Act of 1934 which play a very important role in the functioning of Reserve Bank of India? What role does the RBI play in the Indian economy? Right? For example, they'll say RBI is the banker to the banks. RBI is the bank to Government of India. RBI is the bank of last resort. RBI manages forex reserves, etc. What do you mean by all of that? And apart from this, within the banking, you are also expected to understand why Government of India is merging the banks. For example, couple of years ago, there were a lot of public sector banks. Even today, some of the books say that there are 19 public sector banks. There are 20 plus public sector banks. No, Government of India has started consolidating the public sector banks. For example, last couple of years, Government of India has merged Vijaya Bank, Dena Bank and Bank of Baroda. 10 public sector banks have been merged into 4 public sector banks. And by the way, what do you mean by a public sector bank? Under what regulation of RBI these particular public sector banks actually fall? You will have to study all of it. In addition to this, you are also expected to understand concept of cooperative banking structure in India. What is the role of Reserve Bank of India in regulating cooperative banks? What kind of a banking regulation act amendment is applicable on the cooperative banks? What is the idea of a dual regulation of the cooperative banks, etc. Plus Basel guidelines. What are the important Basel guidelines? How they are being implemented? What are the important guidelines, etc. In addition to this, within the banking, you are also expected to learn about NBFCs and non-banking financial companies, different types of new types of banks, for example, payment banks, small finance bank, etc. That is the scope of coverage in this particular chapter on banking, RBI and NBFC. Then another very important chapter, that is the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy in simple terms refers to all the expenditure measures as well as the taxation policies of the government. Whenever Government of India takes any policy regarding taxation as well as expenditure, that is counted as a part of fiscal policy. Now within the fiscal policy, what is the expectation of UPSC? What you are supposed to read? You are supposed to read concept of budget. What is budget? How it is implemented, how it is prepared, which is the most important authority in preparation of this particular budget. Why do we prepare budget in the first place? Is the term budget mentioned in the Constitution of India? How the budget is passed, how the budget is divided. For example, budget is divided into the capital account and the current account. Why this particular division? Why distinction is made? You need to understand. And apart from that, the most important concept of budgeting will be the accounts in the budget. The budget accounts have to be measured, that is basically divided, classified. Then you will have to use these particular budget accounts to calculate deficits. I'm pretty sure you must have come across deficits in the newspaper such as revenue deficit, fiscal deficit, budget deficit, monetization of the deficit, primary deficit, effective revenue deficit, etc. How these particular deficits are measured? What is the importance of each of the deficit? I mentioned around 6 deficits. Do we calculate all the 6 deficits? If yes, what is the importance? If no, why some of them are not calculated? What is FRBM? What is Encasing Committee Review on FRBM? What does it say? These are the important areas that you're supposed to cover in the fiscal policy. After this, you should also read the concept of disinvestment. Within the budgeting, there is this idea of a disinvestment. Why disinvestment is done? What is the role of disinvestment? How does Government of India conduct a disinvestment? What does it do with the proceeds of disinvestment, etc. After this, read about Finance Commission. The 15th Finance Commission recommendations are applicable today, but what is the role of the Finance Commission? Which article in the Indian Constitution talks about Finance Commission? How it is appointed? Who are there in the Finance Commission? And what kind of recommendations are provided by the 15th Finance Commission, or for that matter, generally the Finance Commissions? You will have to read and understand all these particular aspects within the fiscal policy. Then financial market. What is a bond? What is an IPO, initial public offering? In the last couple of years, in case of India, many companies have actually gone for an IPO, right? For example, Zomato has gone for an IPO. Paytm has gone for an IPO. What is this idea of an IPO? How it is conducted? What is the role of SEBI in all of it? What do you mean by anchor investors? How the shares are allocated? What is a book building process, etc. Plus, what do you mean by bond? What do you mean by shares? What kind of different types of bonds are there? Different shares are there? Concept of ECB, external commercial borrowings. All are the important areas that you need to understand within the concept of financial market. Then the idea of a planning. 5-year plans have been implemented in India. From 1951, we started with the first 5-year plan. And the 12th 5-year plan was started from 2012. Midway, it was discontinued. The government changed. The new government basically abolished the planning commission. New authority, Niti Aayog, was set up. So you need to understand why did we start with the concept of economic planning in India. What are the different 5-year plans which are important for the UPSC exams? What do you mean by the concept of inclusive growth, which was actually initiated in the idea of a 11th 5-year plan as well as 12th 5-year plan? You need to understand all of them. Plus, then you need to evaluate the 60 plus years of planning in India. The first 5-year plan was implemented from 1951 and the 12th 5-year plan we started from 2012. So what is the evaluation of the 60 plus years of planning in India? You need to study that. Then you need to also study about the concept of Niti Aayog, National Institution for Transforming India. International trade. Under this, focus on exchange rates, the balance of payments within exchange rate, different mechanisms to determine exchange rate, how the exchange rate is determined in India, what kind of a system is it referred to, did we always follow this kind of a exchange rate mechanism? In case of balance of payment, what is a current account? What is a capital account? In the context of India, we have only 2 accounts, but IMF says there are 3 accounts, current, capital and financial. What is the role of RBI? How does RBI stabilize exchange rate, etc. Then you also need to understand the concept of economic integration. In the last couple of years, India signed multiple trade agreements with other member countries under WTO. For example, very recently, we signed a trade agreement with Australia. What is the name of that agreement? What is the importance? We have signed an agreement with United Arab Emirates. What is the importance? What are the important provisions in that? By signing these agreements, what does India aim to achieve? What is the idea of economic integration, within which there are multiple stages such as PTA, Preferential Trade Agreement, FTA, Free Trade Agreement, Customs Union, Common Market, etc. You need to understand all these particular aspects. Then the subsidies, right? Subsidies plus agriculture. What is the concept of a subsidy? Why Government of India provides a subsidies in the first place? What is the issue related to subsidies? Examples of subsidy regimes, for example, LPG subsidy or the system of a direct benefit transfer which is being implemented. More than 300 schemes are covered under that. Agriculture sector concept of MSP, minimum support price. Is it legally guaranteed? How it is calculated? Which authority gives the recommendation to the Cabinet Committee on Economic Affairs? What is warehousing? What is food processing? Right? What is irrigation within agriculture sector? What is the importance of that? What is the importance of fertilizers within the agriculture sector? Do we produce all the fertilizers? If yes, how much? Do we import? If yes, how much? What are the important sources? What is the issue currently related to fertilizers, etc. That is the scope of coverage within the concept of subsidies and agriculture. Then there is industry and services. What are the various industrial policies from independence in India? There is an industrial policy of 1948, Then there was an industrial policy of 1956. Then there is a most important industrial policy of 1991, which is also referred to as a new economic policy or new industrial policy, or famously LPG reforms. Then there is an industrial policy in the form of Atmanirbhar Bharat, Make in India, Startup India, Stand Up India, etc. Right? What are the various importance or important points regarding these particular policies? Are there any objectives? What has Government of India achieved by implementing them? Are there any concerns related to these particular schemes? Right? Etc. You need to understand the overall viewpoint of these particular industrial policies. After that, focus on MSME sector. What is the definition of MSME? Why MSMEs are very important for the Indian economy? What are the issues which are faced by the MSME sector? And in recent times, Government of India has implemented so many reforms to help out MSME sector. You'll have to discuss all of it. Then investment types or investment models. There is FDI, foreign direct investment. FPI or FII, foreign portfolio investment, foreign institutional investors. There is a concept of a depository receipts within FDI. There is this idea of a double taxation avoidance agreement. You need to understand what is PPP, public-private partnership. What is the importance of that? Why Government of India promotes PPP? What are the various important committee recommendations related to this, etc. Plus special economic zones and NIMZs, National Investment Manufacturing Zones. So these are the very important areas within the investment model that you need to study. Then there is infrastructure, the idea of infrastructure. What do you mean by infrastructure? What are the different forms of infrastructure? What are the issues related to development of infrastructure in India? And examples of infrastructure such as oil, airport, port, power, etc. You need to study different aspects of infrastructure. Then there is this idea of inclusive growth. Generally, this idea of inclusive growth has been focused more in the mains rather than in the prelims. But anyways, what do you mean by inclusive growth? Why it is important? Has India achieved inclusive growth? In order to achieve inclusive growth, what Government of India has done so far? What should be done in the coming days? That is the important aspects you need to understand in the context of inclusive growth. And finally, some international organizations such as WTO, World Trade Organization, World Bank, or for that matter even IMF, International Monetary Fund. You will have to study important aspects related to all these organizations. So this is in just the syllabus that you are expected to read for the UPSC examination, that is Civil Services Preliminary Examination. Now what should be the references? Most of you will say, sir, yes, very good. You have told us what to read, but tell us now from where should I read it? Start with one book, textbook, any reference book. Start with an institution book that has been provided to you. Many of you will say, sir, this book, that book, A, B or C or X, Y, Z. Because I heard a topper say that this book is good. I heard a topper say that I did not refer to any book. I heard a topper say that I referred to 4 books. What should I do? I am confused. Understand this. You don't have to read more than one book for a static understanding. Whatever the static, right? You don't have to read more than one book. Even if you read 10 books, all the 10 books will discuss the same aspects of the static knowledge. GDP can be defined in multiple ways, but ultimately they will reach GDP itself. Methodology, they will use different denominations, but they will tell you the same thing in a different way. So please do not waste your time. Do not read multiple references book for understanding static source. Read one static book more than sufficient. But some of you will basically say, sir, I'm a starter in economics. I'm like a child who is learning to walk now. I don't even know how to stand up. What would you recommend in that particular situation? If you are basically learning to walk or let's say stand up in economics, my strong advice to you people would be start with NCERT books. Start with NCERT books. NCERTs will give you very, very simple concepts in a much better manner, in a much lucid way. And very simple language is used. Just like telling a kid about alphabets or let's say teaching about the spelling of the various, let's say, the words as such. So NCERTs will build your basics. So if your basics is very weak, your fundamentals are very weak, obviously the application part will also become very weak. So foundation should be strong. If you are starting from the scratch, then my recommendation would be start with NCERTs. And these are the titles of the books of the NCERTs. Start with this. What about the current affairs, sir? Static portion is over. What about the current affairs? This is my recommendation. Read one national daily, either Hindu or Indian Express, left to you. It is your choice, you make it. In addition to this, you will also have to read 2 magazines monthly. You're lucky people. These magazines are published once in a month, not every week. Imagine if Yojana was published every week. You will have to read 4 magazines or 4 editions of the same magazine every month. No, it is published once a month, Yojana as well as Kurukshetra. In addition to this, you are also expected to know about the proposals in the budget and the concepts that have been discussed in the economic survey. Questions can be asked from there. Then one very important area, schemes. Many of you will say, sir, schemes. What is the source? From where can I get these particular schemes or the knowledge about the schemes? You can get it from India Yearbook. So the static portion as well as the dynamic portion for Indian economy. Now, what kind of questions have been asked in UPSC Prelims? Just to give you a taste of the question. Don't fall into panic. Don't say, sir, I don't know any of these particular questions. I've never heard of these particular terminologies in my life. Absolutely no concern. You are starting now. You will come across all of these particular terminologies in Indian economy. First question, the money multiplier in an economy increases with which one of the following? Money multiplier simply means if you supply money, or if you basically keep money in a banking sector, banks will give loans to others. For example, you are a bank, you will collect deposit from the customer, you will give it as a loan to me. I will take it, purchase a home, give the money to the bank again, enters into banking sector, again loans are created. So under the concept of banking, you will come across a concept called as a money multiplier, which means once the money is supplied into the banks, banks will create loans. As a result of this, overall money supply rises up. So money multiplier in an economy increases with which one of the following? Increase in CRR, increase in SLR, increase in banking habit of the people, increase in the population of the country. The right option for this particular question will be increase in the habit of the banking of the people. Again, don't worry about this. I assume you are going to start with the studies in the Indian economy. Now, don't worry. Don't say that, sir, I don't know what is CRR, what is SLR. Under banking, when you discuss the functions of RBI, you will come across all of these particular terminologies. I'm just giving you a taste of what kind of questions are asked in the prelims. Second, in India, the central bank's function as the lender of last resort usually refers to which of the following? RBI is referred to as a lender of last resort. And this particular term, lender of last resort, is applicable only in one situation, that is whenever the banks require money. RBI provides money to the banking sector. That is the precise reason the RBI is referred to as a lender of last resort. So for this particular question, it will be question number or option B, which is the right option. Next one, which among the following steps is most likely to be taken at the time of economic recession? Recession simply means there is a negative growth. The manufacturing of goods and services and the sales of it is not increasing, rather decreasing. That is a situation called as a recession situation. And whenever there is a recession in the economy, please understand, it is the role of Government of India to promote recovery. Government should spend money. Government should create jobs. Government should create infrastructure, etc. So for this particular question, the right option will be option B, increase in expenditure on public projects, because the government should create jobs, government should spend money during recession. So right option will be option B. So these are the kind of questions, again just an example, these are the kind of questions which can be asked by UPSC in the preliminary examination. So what we have discussed, let me put in a nutshell now. We started with what is the number of questions which are asked and what is the inference that you need to draw. Somewhere around 15 questions are asked from Indian economy. What are the important chapters? The list is there. Please glance. Do not mug up the list of the chapters because you are supposed to read all those chapters individually. Then what are the references? Static portion, dynamic portion. Static, one book is sufficient. If you are very weak in fundamentals, start with NCERTs. Dynamic, whole list has been provided. Newspaper, you are expected to make notes, revise the current affairs, right? You are expected to revise current affairs. Then you are expected to read Yojana and Kurukshetra, the budget and economic survey, and for schemes, you can get this information from India Yearbook. And so this is in a gist that basically represents the syllabus as well as the strategy that you need to follow for clearing this UPSC preliminary examination, specifically acing the questions on Indian economy. Thank you. Have a great day.